Respected judge, please release that demon youth so that I can personally hunt him down and end his life. These words were once uttered in a Japanese court case, sending chills down the spines of all who heard them. Often, when we witness a child or a young person committing a crime, we tend to feel sympathy and forgive them. Actually, most children who commit crimes do so out of ignorance, curiosity, or a lack of understanding. This is why the world has developed juvenile laws to protect these innocent young. However, in the case of the demon youth that I'll tell you today, I wonder if anyone would still feel compassion for him after hearing his story. Despite his young age and not yet of legal age, his actions were truly evil. So, without further ado, let's dive into the story that Just a Story brings to you today, Takayuki Fukuda, the first youth to be sentenced to death in Japan. Let's introduce the Motomura family first. This family consists of the husband, Hiroshi Motomura, a young Japanese office worker, the wife, Yayoi Motomura, a housewife, and their 11-month-old daughter, Yuka Motomura. As a child, Hiroshi discovered that he had a condition that made him physically weaker than most other children. This condition also had the side effect of making Hiroshi infertile. For a man, this would be a source of great shame. So, Hiroshi made a vow to himself that he would never date any woman. Not only was he embarrassed about his condition, but he was also afraid of hurting a woman by not being able to fulfill her life completely. One day, however, Hiroshi met a woman named Yayoi who made his heart flutter. She was a very kind woman, not particularly beautiful in a model-like way, but she had a warm and comforting presence. Hiroshi tried to resist his attraction to Yayoi, telling himself that he was not a normal man and that his illness could ruin their relationship. He tried to ignore her for a long time, but he couldn't help but feel drawn by her. One day, Yayoi gathered her courage and confessed her feelings to Hiroshi. "Hiroshi," she said, "I like you." Hiroshi's heart swelled with joy. Could it be that this wonderful woman had feelings for him? But he couldn't bring himself to accept her love. He told her about his health problems and explained that he didn't think it would be fair to marry her and not be able to give her a normal relationship. Yayoi listened quietly, her eyes filled with understanding and compassion. When Hiroshi finished speaking, she took his hands in hers and looked into his eyes. "Hiroshi," she said, "love is not just about sex. It's about being together, supporting each other through thick and thin, and finding happiness in each other's company. I don't care about your health problems. All I want is to be with you." Hiroshi was stunned. He had never imagined that someone would love him unconditionally like that. Yayoi's words were a turning point in Hiroshi's life. He realized that he was worthy of love and happiness, and he began to see the world with new eyes. He no longer felt like a lesser person because of his health problems. Instead, he was determined to make the most of his life and give Yayoi the happiness she deserved. With Yayoi's love and support, Hiroshi overcame his fears and insecurities. He became a successful businessman and a loving husband and father. He never forgot the day Yayoi told him that love was not about sex, but about being together and supporting each other. And he never stopped being grateful for her unconditional love. In due course, they got married, and Mr. Hiroshi had sex. It turns out his body didn't have any issues that the doctor was worried about, so Hiroshi ended up having a child, a really cute little one. When Hiroshi returns home exhausted, hearing his child's voice just makes him feel like he is floating. Alright, let's jump back to our story for today. We've got to rewind to April 14, 1999, in Japan. Back then, Hiroshi was making his way home from work. He was exhausted from the events of the day at the office. But when he got home that day, something strange happened. When he stepped inside, he didn't hear the usual sounds of his wife chatting with their kid. Plus, there was a newspaper from that day lying in front of the house. Normally, his wife would take it in every morning. So, what was up? Why wasn't she doing her wifely duties? Confused, Hiroshi opened the door and went inside. His heart sank when he saw that the house was eerily quiet and dark. It was also a complete mess. His wife's wallet was nowhere to be found. When Hiroshi saw this, he was freaking out. He wondered if his wife had run away or if he had done something to upset her and she had taken their kid to her mom's place. Hiroshi immediately called Yayoi's mother to ask if his wife had come home. His mother-in-law replied that she hadn't seen her daughter or the grandkids, and that she hadn't spoken to her in days. Hiroshi's confusion grew. Where could his wife have gone? While pondering this, Hiroshi noticed a smudge of red liquid on the floor. This trail led him to his closet. By now, many of you might have guessed why there was red liquid on the closet door. Hiroshi did too. But at this point, he had to open the closet door and see what was inside. As soon as he opened the closet door, Hiroshi was met with a horrifying sight: the lifeless body of his wife. It was clear that she had been tortured before being wrapped in a blanket and stuffed into the closet. The subsequent police investigation revealed that the wife had been raped after her murder. The perpetrator was likely a psychopath with necrophilia, a sexual attraction to corpses. As if that wasn't bad enough, while Hiroshi was still reeling in shock from his wife's body, he looked up and noticed a plastic bag in the top shelf of the closet. Upon closer inspection, his heart sank and his knees buckled. Inside the bag was the body of his infant daughter, not even a year old. She too had been murdered and then carefully packaged. The sight of his two loved ones gone in such a horrific way was too much for the grieving father to bear. Hiroshi didn't know what to say. He could only run to grab his phone and call the police. But the problem was that when the police first arrived, they thought that Hiroshi was the one who committed the crime. This is because most of the time when there are horrific family incidents like this, it usually stems from family problems. If it's not about catching someone cheating, then it's usually a money problem. However, when the police investigated, they found that Hiroshi had nothing to do with the crime. This is because he had alibis from his work colleagues that he was at work from morning to night on the day of the incident. So, the police started to suspect that it was a Yakuza gang or something. Maybe Hiroshi or his family had a problem with the Yakuza before. This is because the way the victim was killed was so brutal, it was as if the killer had a deep grudge against them. Even a child under the age of 1 was not spared. However, Hiroshi said that he had never had any dealings with the Yakuza, and his neighbors all said that Hiroshi and his family were always nice and helpful. Initially, the police were stumped. There were no obvious clues to lead them to the perpetrator. So, the police had to go to a very important source of information, which was none other than the neighborhood aunties. These wonderful creations of God, who are better at storing information than CCTV cameras, even if they are Japanese aunties. These ladies are like walking encyclopedias of local gossip and information. They know everything that's going on in their neighborhood, even if it happened behind closed doors. And in this case, they didn't disappoint. When the police asked any of the aunties, they would say, "Oh, that day before the incident happened, I heard a wailing sound coming from that house. I didn't know where it was coming from, but at first I thought it was just a fight between Mr. Hiroshi and his wife. But when I heard about the murder, I knew that the wailing sound had to be something related to the case." "And before you heard the sound, did you see anything unusual about the house?" the police asked. "Oh, yes, I did. Before the incident happened, I saw a plumber from a company knocking on the door of Mr. Hiroshi's house. After that, no one else came to the house. So, if it was the perpetrator, it had to be the plumber," the auntie replied. After that, the auntie described the details of the plumber's uniform in such detail that the police were able to figure out which company the uniform belonged to. With all the information gathered, the police wasted no time in heading to the plumbing company. They wanted to inquire whether they had sent any maintenance workers to Hiroshi's house. To their surprise, the company confirmed that no one was dispatched to the house on that particular day. They thoroughly checked their records and found no indication of any visits. However, they couldn't rule out the possibility of a visit within the previous 2 to 3 days. We sent a new trainee to Hiroshi's house 2 to 3 days prior to repair a leaking pipe, the company representative explained. But he's no longer with us. I fired him for his unacceptable behavior. He was always causing trouble and constantly arriving late or taking unauthorized breaks. He even snuck off to play video games during work hours. I told him to return our uniforms when I let him go, but he just took them with him. So, if you find him, please let him know to return our uniforms. The cops didn't really care about the kid's bad behavior. They just wanted to know if he was involved in the crime. The fact that he had stolen the company uniforms made them suspicious. Could he have used them to disguise himself and trick Hiroshi's family? As the cops dug deeper, they found another connection. The kid's father worked for the same company as Hiroshi. This was definitely something worth checking out. They asked for the kid's name and address, hoping to track him down at his house. The kid's name was Takayuki Fukuda. He was an 18-year-old teenager. Let's get to know Takayuki. Takayuki's life has been quite rough since the very beginning. Ever since he was born, he has been raised by his single father. His father would often come home drunk and, in his intoxicated state, he probably thought he was messy. As soon as he got home, he kicked Takayuki into the wall. Takayuki's misfortunes didn't end there. His mother, too, was subjected to his father's abusive behavior. Unable to bear the mistreatment any longer, she took her own life when Takayuki was still a child. Instead of feeling remorse for his wife's death, Takayuki's father simply moved on, bringing in a new woman to squeeze and knead him and take care of Takayuki in a perfunctory manner. He would provide Takayuki with money for food and education. Once Takayuki graduated, his father arranged for him to get a job. The real reason Takayuki wasn't returning his company uniform wasn't out of spite or a desire to get back at them for firing him. Instead, it stemmed from his intense fear of his father. Takayuki needed to wear his uniform every time he left the house to deceive his father. He was still working, but would then head to play games until lunchtime, pretending to be on a work break before returning home for lunch. As we delve deeper into Takayuki's story, we can't help but empathize with the immense pressure he must have been under. This, in turn, led him to become a recluse in his adulthood, spending most of his time at home, glued to his screen. Whenever he ventured out, it was straight to the game center, his sanctuary from the harsh realities of life. As Takayuki grew up a bit and became a bit more of an adult, he started into areas kids shouldn't really go, you know. That was the mysterious zone in a Japanese bookstore, to explain a bit of Japanese culture. You see, in Japanese bookstores, they are quite open, like really open, to the extent that they have sections where they display provocative manga or porn books for everyone to see quite openly. Even though they politely ask not to let young children in, if anyone has watched Shinchan, a popular anime, you would know that it's quite normal for kids to sneak in there. And that's where Takayuki, as a teenager, wanted to explore and see if there was anything interesting. He would sneak in sneakily, he would just go in and check out provocative books and such. This was like opening up a whole new world for Takayuki, something he had never seen before. One of Takayuki's favorite styles of squeezing and kneading is bondage, handcuffs, and BDSM. And as he grew older, he delved deeper into it. He would spend hours searching for violent BDSM content on the internet, and sometimes he would lock himself in his room with tissues for days on end. Takayuki's lack of parental guidance only made his descent into darkness worse. His only confidants were his teenage friends, who shared his fascination with violence BDSM. He became obsessed with making his violent fantasies a reality. One day, Takayuki got a job as a plumber at Hiro's house. This would be his chance to put his dark plans into action. And when he saw Hiroshi's wife, who was very beautiful, after seeing his wife that day, Takayuki couldn't get her image out of his mind. That's why Takayuki came up with a wicked plan. On the day of the incident, He took a plumber's tool and disguised himself as a plumber to fix the pipes. When Hiroshi's wife opened the door and saw him, she thought, "Oh, it's the plumber coming to fix something." He carried on without paying attention, allowing the young man to explore the house to see if Hiroshi was there that day. When he realized that the husband was at work and Takayuki was trying to squeeze and knead Hiroshi's wife, she refused. "Are you crazy? My husband is the only one allowed to squeeze and knead my arms." She resisted, so Takayuki forcefully dragged and pulled her until finally, in the end, Takayuki shut down Hiroshi's wife's life. After shutting down Takayuki, what will he do? He tried to test his evil intentions with this woman. It was very wicked, but it wasn't wicked enough. He then proceeded to walk over to the children and tried to find the shutdown button on the baby. Takayuki shut down baby's life, and then neatly arranging their bodies in the closet. This is the grim scene that Hiroshi later discovered when he came home. In addition to that, this devil also stole his belongings and wallet to use for himself. He bought snacks and then went back to playing games as if nothing had happened. Takayuki was so relaxed that even when the police came to arrest him, he was arrested in a very relaxed manner. He was just walking around town when the police arrested him. I don't know if this young man knew a loophole in Japanese law, but for those who were under the age of majority, 20 years old at the time in Japan, the punishment would not be too severe. So Takayuki took advantage of this opportunity to make this case. The irony of this case is that the court used the juvenile law to sentence Takayuki. He was only sentenced to a few years in prison, which means he will be back on the streets soon. Because Takayuki is still young and innocent, he may not have realized what he did wrong. The court hopes that prison will change Takayuki's ways and that he will become a good person when he is released. There was also another Takayuki crazy thing that happened during the trial. Takayuki said that he put the bodies of the wife and daughter in the closet because he thought there was Doraemon inside. He thought that Doraemon would come out of the time machine and press the reset button to bring the two people back to life. It is unclear whether this was a lie or if Takayuki was trying to make himself look insane to get a lighter sentence. This is a classic tactic in murder trials where criminals try to appear crazy or mentally ill. In the end, Takayuki was only sentenced to a few years in prison. This incident brought great pain to Hiroshi, but it was far from over. Takayuki had no idea who he had messed with. Hiroshi had grown up in a difficult environment. He had been sick since childhood and had to work harder than others to prove himself. Therefore, his efforts were double that of others. When the court ruled that Takayuki, who had harmed his wife and daughter, was not guilty of a serious crime, Hiroshi was furious. He blurted out in court that if the court was going to sentence Takayuki to only a few years in prison, he would rather the demon youth be released and he would hunt him down and end his life. The father was filled with anger and hatred. This prompted the father to appeal the case to the court, asking for a retrial. The case became so controversial that it sparked a debate about changing Japan's juvenile protection laws. Some people agreed with the father, arguing that the child's age should not be a factor in determining their guilt, especially considering the deliberate nature of their actions. This led to a major drama in Japan at the time. Several lawyers even came together. But they came to represent the demon youth in court, not to support the father or Hiroshi, but they fight for the juvenile's rights. They argued that Hiroshi was not following the law and that changing it would only lead to harsher punishments for future offenders. In short, the lawyers strongly disagreed with Hiroshi's stance and maintained that Takayuki was still not an adult and deserved leniency. Ultimately, Hiroshi lost the second trial. This trial took a toll on Hiroshi's mental and physical health. He lost his appetite and couldn't sleep. When he showed up at work, he looked like a walking corpse. And when it was time to go home, he often didn't want to. The house was full of memories that he couldn't bear. So sometimes he would sleep at train stations, on the streets, or even at work. His mental health was in shambles. And on top of that, his physical health started to deteriorate. He became visibly ill. Then Hiroshi met a new woman. She was like a gift from God, sent to change his life. She encouraged him, saying, "Don't give up, Mr. Hiroshi. The one who should be suffering and feeling like a living death is not you, but that demon child. Don't worry, I'll always be by your side. I'll fight with you." This was the moment that rekindled Hiroshi's fighting spirit. He gathered a new group of supporters, not lawyers this time, but thousands of ordinary citizens. When the townspeople heard about the devilish child who had been born, they decided to send him back to hell. Thousands of people signed a petition to support Hiroshi and reopen the case in court. However, Takayuki, the perpetrator, changed his plea and shamelessly claimed that he had not intended to shut down either the wife or the daughter. He also claimed that he had no intention of doing anything to the wife's body. He said that when he saw Hiroshi's wife, he simply thought she looked very much like his own mother, which made him miss his mother and want to hug her. So, he tried to hug her, but the wife resisted. They struggled, and in the process, his hand accidentally shut down on the wife. He said he was very sorry after that and wanted to bring her back to life. He claimed to have heard about a way to revive someone by assault sexually on a body that had been shut down. Hiroshi had a secret weapon in this round of the trial, a letter that Takayuki wrote to his friends while in prison. Remember, Takayuki hung out with a group of bad friends who always talked about inappropriate things. In prison, with nothing to do, Takayuki wrote letters to his friends, telling them about his experiences. Since what happened, what did he do? Let's put it simply, there are so many details that the police don't need to investigate anything further, right? But that's not enough. In the letter, the content is written in a way that does not respect your wife and your late daughter Hiroshi. He basically says craving is a normal thing for living beings, just like how a dog would jump and crush a female dog it finds attractive. And he says, since he finds Hiroshi's wife sweet and appealing, he just jumped and crushed. What's wrong with that? The guy also ended the letter by saying, "Friends outside, just wait a little while longer, because in a bit, my punishment will be over. And when that time comes, we'll go celebrate together." It's a letter written without any shame at all. As soon as this piece of evidence was presented in court, the judge blurted out, "This is truly evil." Because every word that the young man had written in his letter indicated that he had planned everything in advance. And it seemed that he had no remorse for his actions whatsoever. Therefore, based on this letter, the Court of Justice overturned its previous decision to sentence him to only a short prison term. Instead, they sentenced him to death, and in the end, although Mr. Hiroshi was unable to bring back the lives of his wife and daughter, at least he received the justice he had fought for so long. And that's how the story ends. However, the more children learn about juvenile protection laws and use them to protect themselves, especially with the widespread use of the internet. What do you think about the need for youth protection laws? Feel free to comment and share your thoughts. For now, I must take my leave. Bye-bye.